Welcome to Bite Size, brought to you by Priestley's Gourmet Delights. Each episode will bring you ideas, news and insights into the food service industry with a bite-sized summary. I'm Xanny Christopherson and I will be your host. Welcome back, and we hope you enjoyed part 1 of Michelle's episode. In part 2 of Michelle's episode, we dive deeper into inclusion leadership and how everyone can be the best leader for their team. I'm really excited for you all to listen to this and take away as much as I did from this conversation. Without further ado, let's get into this incredible chat. According to Forbes, I just want to read this stat out because I think it's fascinating. So women make up 52% of the hospitality sector. Out of that, 30% of them are leadership positions and only 6% are CEOs.
Mm-hmm. Why?
It's devastating.
And I think for anyone who has any kind of stake in the hospitality industry, and let's face it, it's tough out there. It's tough for hospitality. I'd be going, how can I make a sustainable business without harnessing all of the ideas of all of the people who are probably going to be representative of the customers and the communities that I'm serving. The customers and the communities whose wallets I want to share of.
So we've done research on that. So the women hold the lion's share of the purchasing power.
80%. 80% of consumer buying decisions are made by women.
You've got the exact data.
Absolutely.
And I know in my household, I absolutely own the purse strings. So you should be talking to me.
Yep.
And I'm one of the unique ones. I'm
female
part of this
economy.
I'm the 6% that's the CEO within the hospitality industry. So,
and it's interesting, this whole concept. When I first started really diving into, because I've got a whole practice around sport and levelling the playing field in sport. But whether it's sport or hospitality or retail or the big 4 corporates, whatever it is, there's this thing. And coming back to your question around unconscious bias, unconscious bias is a set of assumptions. Unconscious bias is shortcuts that our brain provides us. So as humans, we've got like just zillions, I don't know if that's a correct term, but a lot of data points coming at us. What we see, what we hear, what we taste, all of that coming at us in every minute. Our brain cannot process enough data to have us respond in the moment. So it relies on shortcuts, which are based on lived experience.
Yes.
So, for example, I can see a kettle boiling. My shortcuts tell me, because I've had this experience, if I touch that boiling kettle, I'm going to get burnt. So I know I don't have to touch it. I don't have to be educated. I've learnt boiling kettle. And what we've learned over time is, these shortcuts are, women must want to stay at home and care for children. Or in sport, women must want to buy pink things when they buy merchandise for sport. Or women don't want to go to football games. Women don't want to buy a corporate box at the MCG for their clients. So what we do is we design products, services and experiences with men in mind. It's
so true. I went to the Queensland State of Origin for the females last week, right? I've had excellent game. But I've also been to the men's one and the experience between the women's one and it was a corporate experience.
Yep.
Versus the corporate experience at the men's one, completely different.
So
we're in amazing seats, don't get me wrong, but we're on field. In the men's one, we're up in a corporate box. So,
there's so many layers about prioritisation. But I guess the other thing that I'd say is that when we design anything, and I'm a massive fan of human-centred design and design thinking, and I bring that into everything that I do. It's like, who is the recipient of the thing? And do we know what she needs? And these might be unmet needs, they might be needs she's not even aware, and this is particularly important for a business to consumer market. Does she really know that Or does she need the fact that Priestley's can produce a whole range of goods that are going to save her a shed load of time when the kid says, Mum, it's my turn to take cakes tomorrow. She goes, awesome, I've got a packet in the freezer and I can just bring them out and off you go. And people go, oh, my God, this is amazing. Your mum's such a good cook. Anyway, but these things don't happen if we design with one set of humans in mind, with one set of humans at the design table. So my point being, when we have diversity at the top table and all of the tables, including the design table, we're more likely to have someone sitting in there going, actually, do you know what? I've found that when I want to do the X, this really works much better. Oh, fantastic. Good that we know that. I've consulted to a couple of the Australian rules football clubs, and one of them in particular was really clear. There's a group of women that we cannot attract as members, corporate or otherwise. We want to do that. Help us with it, Michelle. I said, well, what do they want? They went, well, that's what we want you to tell us. I said, I'm not one of them. Get them in a room, give them a beautiful lunch, give them outstanding wine and ask them what they want, and then design the products, goods and services based on that. Guess what they did? Guess what happened? Happy days.
I want to go to one of these lunches.
I know, but what they were doing was sending a whole bunch of young male ex-footballers to try and sell stuff.
Yeah.
And these women are going, doesn't appeal to me. I don't want to go and sit out there. I want to have this, that. Anyway, so the bottom line is, for business, we have to say, who's our community? Who are our customers now and our customers that we want to have as customers? And how do we mirror that in everything that we create?
Yeah.
And then you also bring that to the workplace.
Yeah.
Because workplaces also have to work for women, and so many of them still don't, for all of the same reasons, because they've been designed for and largely inhabited by men since businesses started being in offices, about probably 150 years ago, and not much has changed.
Yeah, but it comes back to your conversation before about it's the leaders at the top.
Absolutely.
And it's the leaders at the top that want to have to make the change.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the things, and I'm not saying that we're the best, because there's always room for improvement, but most recently we've got a mother's room now. So I remember back in the day when I had my child, there was no place for me to pump.
Yeah.
And pumping at the best of times, it's PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but we've also allowed carers on site so mum can actually breastfeed and spend time with the baby whilst they're at work, and that's open for all of our workplaces.
I can remember, because I was back at work 5 months after my first was born, and I had to go back full time because there was no part time, and I was still breastfeeding him. And honestly, I would just about set a land speed record getting out of the office of the afternoon, getting to my friend's place and whacking him on the boob because my boobs were exploding. Yeah. Way too much information, listen, sorry, but I couldn't express. It just was a mind-body fail. And if he'd been able to be brought to me at lunchtime for me to feed, oh, my God, that would have been wonderful. But I wasn't going to do it in a toilet or in a car park.
I know. I feel exactly the same. So I went back after 3 months and my husband was the stay-at-home husband and he used to get high-fived for bringing the child to go and get weighed.
Yes.
Meanwhile, I'm working a full-time job, pumping and breastfeeding and still getting up in the middle of the night.
And you've also grown a child inside your body.
Yeah. How much of a superstar was he?
Oh, I know. I know.
I think we can connect a lot on this. But anyway. So what does inclusive leadership actually look like in today's fast-paced, high-pressure environments?
Well, it looks like, number one, no matter what level of leadership you are, that you really know who your people are and what makes them tick. I think, I read an article this morning on Substack from a woman, Dr. Betty Ludwig, who I really admire, and she did an article about what good looks like, because she's like me, we're often talking about what good doesn't look like.
Yeah.
And the things that she said, that this one leader she had, and I went, oh God, this is so true. He knew his team. And for me, every time I felt really good about myself and my work and my team was when my boss knew me and knew me really well. And as a result of my boss really knowing, I felt that they cared. And part of that caring is then I got to do work that I was good at.
Yeah.
Not always that I wanted to do, because we don't always get what we want, but I had a boss who knew me, so that he could point me, he or they can point you in the direction of where your skills are best utilised. I think that the second one was that really, in fact, there were three, I've forgotten the third one, but it was actually the third one that really resonated with me, because it's something that I used to say to my teams and something I teach now. Leaders have to be a barrier and a bulldozer to bullshit.
Yeah.
So they have to be a barrier to the, corporate skullduggery that can go on. And look, there are human dynamics or politics in every organisation, and not every team member needs to know what's going on all around. So as a leader, we need to say, keep our people well enough informed, but not overburdened with stuff. So that's the barrier. And then the bulldozer through bullshit is bulldoze through the stuff that stops them getting their work done, that stops them from being successful, that stops them from reaching their full potential. So, and we can dress it up and call it inclusive leadership, whatever it may be, but if you really know your people and you really care about the outcomes for them, for the whole team and for the organisation, you're going to make sure that you're caring, and that comes out in your leadership. I think at a deeper level, it's also understanding that not everyone's going to have the same experience in life that you've had. So for me, I always used to say, well, I'm a middle-aged, educated, affluent white woman. Not everyone's had the same experience as me. So what happens to my team members who have brown skin, weren't born in Australia, may have a disability, whatever it may be, I need to have empathy. I can't live their experience, but I need to have empathy for and make sure their needs are met.
Yeah.
And when it comes back to gender equity, some of those things are really practical things that are hugely, like, simple wins are, think about, remember, women doing 75% of the unpaid care in the world. Who gets to do the drop-offs in the mornings, and when do you plan your meetings? Who, I had one woman say to me, this is a little while ago now, but she had a manager who would always have the team stand up at 5:45 at night. And I go, what? So, and she said it was just a nightmare, because most childcare closes at 6, and then it's tick, 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 cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. You've got to pay a lot of money for being late and do the walk of shame, which my children still remind me that I had to do a lot of times. But, simple things like, what's my team's life like, and how can work for them? So let's do our team huddle at 10 a.m. and maybe everyone's in the office, maybe we're all on Teams, but we work out together what that looks like so that we can all be successful together. That's just simple. So that's inclusion.
Yeah. Look, I totally agree. And, like at 5:45 at night, it's bed, bath, and dinner. It's not like the workday's
assuming you've got off the freeway.
Well, that's Melbourne traffic. Brisbane traffic's not so bad yet, but it's getting there.
Yeah.
You are listening to Bite Sized, Insights for the Food Service Industry. Brought to you by Priestley's Gourmet Delights.
So I think, there's all sorts of ways, but if you really know your team, you know those people as human beings, what's going on in their world, you can go, okay, how can I help them reach their full potential? What are the things as a leader that only I can do to help them do that?
But it's actually, you just touched on it, it's really recognising that they're people first.
100%.
And employees second.
Yep.
And I think that's something that's key to making sure that you're a really good leader.
I've got to say, I'm a big fan of the show Severance on Apple TV. And I've got to say, there's big lessons in there. For those of you who haven't watched it, great lessons in leadership. Very short. You've got an outside you and an inside you. Basically, these people go into this organisation and something gets done to their brain and they become a possession of the organisation while they're in the workplace. They don't remember anything, but it's such an interesting take on, we are not robots.
No.
And look, until everyone has a robot doing their job, which will never happen, as leaders, we have to be human first.
Agreed. And we've also got to look at it from we're serving the people around us. It's not for us, it's actually for them.
Yep.
Because that's how we get the best out of them.
Yep. And I think, one of the questions I like to ask leaders is, what do you cause? And they go, what do you mean? I go, what do you cause? And they go, what do you mean, Michelle? I go, okay. When you walk in a room, what happens? What do you cause? People go, yay, Xanny's here. Woohoo, this is going to be fun or good, or yay, we're going to get the information, or oh, holy shit, Michelle's here, And then what do you cause when you walk out of the room? Relief? Or, oh, wow, or, yeah, oh, God, that was a good session. So I want people to, what impact do you have? What do you cause in the group that you're in right now? What do you cause for the people that look to you to lead them?
Yeah.
And keep asking yourself that question, because it's a really good way of looking in the mirror and going, am I really doing the best that I can do as a leader for this group?
I always have a think about, what do I want them to think, feel and say about me?
Yep.
So, 5 minutes before a meeting, before I'm prepping, is, okay, what do I want them to think about? How do I want them to feel? What do I want them to think? And then what do I want them to say after I've left the room?
Yep.
And I think that's a really powerful tool.
Absolutely. Before
you go into a meeting, just to set your frame of mind and how you're going to send a message.
Oh, I agree. And I think, all of us know, all of us who have had leadership responsibility, and particularly, at the executive, the C-suite level, there are times when, you might not be having the best day, but you've got to put game face on.
Yeah.
It's like, people just showtime. And it's not being inauthentic. It's about going, what do these people need to see, think, feel as a result of me being in the room? And they don't need to know that I've just had a Barney with the chair of the board and I've got a regulator on my ass about something. They don't need to know that.
No.
They need to know that you've got them.
Yeah.
And you're going to give them direction, you're going to smooth things away, and you're all going to be successful together.
Yeah. Yeah, couldn't agree more. So have you got any strategies to attract and retain women in very male-dominated industries?
Oh, I think it comes back to that design table again. So I think that looking at every part of the employee life cycle is important, and saying, can we run a gender equity? We must run a gender equity lens over it. So number one is, and I do have a client in the food manufacturing industry that we had this exact conversation. Well, people look at our factory, Michelle, and they go, oh, that's just a blah, blah, and they won't want to, they drive past and go, that won't be for me. So there was a perception that this was machines and forklifts and this, that and the other, when the reality was that it couldn't be further from the truth. So at that time, that site manager, and it was in a regional community, so there was that layer of a less expansive talent pool to draw from, but there was talent there anyway. But they knew there's so many women in this town that could be working with us. So they did community outreach, but they started going out and talking to the women that were in the business. I said, ask them, what makes it good about working here? What could be better? What else do we need to do? So they got all of that together. Then they started going out and having, I grew up in a regional town, so the cake stalls, the school fairs, the career days.
The places where the mothers hang out.
Absolutely, and the TAFEs and things like that, saying, hey, we're a really good place to work. And then they had a come and see, like open tours and things like that. So that was one. So they really tried to understand, what do we need to do differently to bring women in? And I said, now, getting women into the workforce is one thing, keeping them there is another. So what are we going to do about culture change? And there was culture change that needed to happen, including we needed breastfeeding rooms. We needed prayer rooms.
Yeah.
So things like that happened. We needed toilets and change rooms that were fit for purpose, including all sorts of things. Even things like, actually, when we were in a particular part of the organisation, they had white uniforms, so it was food. And they said, and when it's really humid, which this environment was, our uniforms are see-through. And they went, oh, my God, why didn't you say something? We didn't know who to talk to about it. So let's change the uniform. So all of these things, right through to, I wonder why we haven't got many women becoming or applying for supervisor roles out on the line. Let's go and lift the lid. And that was literally the campaign name that the CEO had at the time. He said, I'm going to go and lift the lid on this, Michelle. I said, good on you. So he went and lifted the lid, and what it was, well, they haven't got forklift licenses, so they can't go for a supervisor's role. Why do you need a forklift license to be a supervisor? Well, because, but, oh, fair enough. So why haven't they got forklift licenses? Don't know. So let's get everyone their forklift license. Okay. And that's part of the first 6 months. You get your forklift license. Guess what happens? So you just have to get close to where does the representation diverge? So, and what's causing it? Fix it, and then fix the next bit, and then fix the next bit.
Yeah.
Every business is going to have slightly different nuances, but certainly you got attract, retain, advance. Attract, work out, but the retain, get that culture right. There is no point bringing women into an environment where they're not going to feel safe, respected, and valued.
Yeah. And I guess what's resonating with me through this conversation is it isn't rocket science.
No.
It's actually just about understanding your current workforce, asking the right questions.
Absolutely.
And maybe they're uncomfortable questions, but they're the necessary questions to ask in order to advance.
And I do an exercise with every single executive team that I start working with, some of them willingly, others initially unwillingly, but I call it the 5x5. I want you to go and have 5 conversations with 5 women, and I've got 5 questions that I want you to ask and listen to. And, I've got some generic ones, but then we tailor it to whatever we know is going on. And then I say, I want you to have a think about it. Then we all come back together to debrief, and it is often illuminating. Oh, my goodness, Michelle, I had no idea it was so difficult too. Or, wow. And I do remember, and I've told this story lots of times because I was actually really moved by it. One of the execs, this is a little while ago now, he said, I am so ashamed that this has happened on my watch. And I said, okay. I said, so you can feel ashamed, but then what are you going to do about it? And he said, it's not about what I'm going to do about it right now. He said, what I'm going to do about it so it never happens again, irrespective of who's sitting in my seat. And I thought, yes.
That's amazing.
So being able to, again, it's this human-centered design. We've got to go and really listen and be curious and inquire and have empathy for the humans that we're trying to do the right thing for.
Yeah.
And we can't do that based on assumptions because that's the unconscious bias. I assume all women will want pink stuff.
But it is really about, seeking to understand and that curiosity lens that's really going to help us move the dial. I think there's a piece in there as well around education because you don't know what you don't know until you know it.
Absolutely. Well, there's and there's one of the other things I talk about a lot is the competency circle. So right now, there's a whole bunch of people who are unconsciously incompetent when it comes to gender equity and diversity, equity and inclusion, which means I don't know what I don't know, and I'm completely oblivious to the fact that I don't know about it.
Yeah.
They start the education process, and this is often where I'm coming in, is to start that first level. I go, okay, what's happened and what I'm going to do here is make you feel very uncomfortable because you're going to become aware that you are consciously, as in you're going to become conscious that you are incompetent. For senior executives and C-suite and board members, that is a really difficult thing because most of us have got to where we've got because we're pretty bloody clever and we're pretty bloody skilled and talented, and all of a sudden you go, this is something I'm not very good at. That's a bit shit. So I say, be kind to yourself. But we're not going to stay there. And just like driving a car, and the example I always give is when I decided that I was going to learn to drive, my mum was going to teach me, the poor thing. And of course, because I've been watching mum and dad since I was, a little tack, I thought, I'm going to jump into this manual car and nail it. I didn't. I was unconsciously incompetent. I jumped into the car, turned the key on, and bunny hopped and stalled the car. I went, it's not as easy as I thought. So I became consciously incompetent. I don't know what to do. That's a bit shit. So then I had to practice. And of course, then I became consciously competent. But I had to think, right, foot on the clutch, seatbelt on, foot on the clutch, turn the ignition on. So you have to really think, indicators, whatever it may be, look in the mirrors. So you're consciously doing everything. Right through to today, I am virtually unconsciously competent because I don't really have to think about all of those things that I now know by rote. That's the cycle.
Well, practice makes perfect, right?
Well, practice equals progression, because no one would call me a perfect driver. But yeah, practice equals progression. And I think this is another really important part when we think about leadership and people skills and gender equity and diversity, equity and inclusion is nothing stands still. So, I became a manager, 35 years ago for the first time. Now, what I learned then, if I had just stuck to what I'd learned then, I'm in dinosaur territory, right? In fact, I commented on one of my friend's posts this morning around, leadership. Leaders are really focused on continuing professional development.
Yes.
And the journey to leadership mastery is exactly that. There's actually not a destination. We never, ever arrive. So we've got to keep continually updating our skills. But in a practical sense, when I first went to work, and particularly when I first became a supervisor, a manager, I just had to kind of make sure that people turned up, clocked in, did their job, weren't rude to customers, and went home again and balanced their till and all that kind of stuff. Now, as people leaders, we have so many more things on our plate from every spectrum, whether it be the diversity of people we're working with, the industries that we're in, the legal, the regulatory, the risk environments, and the sheer expectations, rightly, that society has on us to create really safe workplaces. So the load is much higher on leaders. And what that does mean, a little bit like your lady who's still doing linen napkins, we're going to lose some stuff that we used to do.
Yeah.
So stop doing the low impact, low value stuff, and as leaders, really get ourselves into that position where we can direct and really, curate the culture in a very, very deliberate, intentional way all the time.
And I think it comes back to what you've been saying before, is it's about being kind to yourself, because you're never going to get it perfect. Like, perfection is overrated as well. It's more about progress. But I think it's also being able to give yourself the courage just to test and play.
True.
That you've just got to have a crack at some things,
True.
like educate yourself, but actually just have a go.
And sorry to interrupt, Xanny, but, and I think that test and play, it depends which country you're in and which industry you're in as to how much risk you can take. There's some countries in the world, and look, the US is not perfect, far from it, but business in the US is very different to business in Australia. So that risk taking, it's a bit of a badge of honour to have gone bankrupt and started again in the US. Look at their president. But anyway, whereas in Australia, I think we have less appetite for that really out there thinking. So I would like to see that change, because I do think we need to take risks, informed risks, and how that plays out from a leadership perspective is let your people test, let them experiment,
give them permission.
Yeah, absolutely, and let them fail. As long as we learn from the failure. If people keep failing at the same thing, we've got to have a bit of a different talk. But perhaps we won't do that again. But I think there's real value in every single one of us, and I include myself in that, going, what's the worst thing that could happen here? I remember when I was working in banking, and it was towards the end of my corporate career. I'd kind of had it, and I remember saying to someone, for God's sake, it's an automatic teller machine. We're not curing freaking cancer here. Let's just, and they went, and they looked at me, and I went, what? And I said, seriously? What's the worst thing that could happen? It'll spit out 20s instead of 50s. They're going, but I went, in the big scheme of things?
Yeah.
They went, Michelle, you don't understand. I said, actually, I do understand. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
It was just not cool to do anything outside of those little lanes.
Yeah.
There's the death of innovation. Anyway, that's a whole other podcast.
It is. And I feel like we could talk for hours. So I just want to finish up on a couple of other questions. So I really just wanted to touch base, and if you could give some advice to some of our listeners on any books or podcasts for hospitality and small business leaders around diversity, equity and inclusion, that would be great.
Yeah, so I have some tried and true favourites. I can never, ever go past Jim Collins' Good to Great.
Yeah.
As a book. I have it. I now have, I think it's my 4th version sitting in my bookcase because I kept lending it to people and I never got it back. It's just got the absolute fundamentals about business. And look, I use it for my own business. I've used the principles in big business. I use it in my leadership training, everything. So I think Good to Great is a great one, particularly for business owners who want to know how to, particularly to scale and get a really good, repeatable, scalable, sustainable business going without them having to be at the centre of it. One of the big challenges for people, particularly entrepreneurs who start businesses, is it's their baby.
Yeah.
And being able to create the systems and the processes that allow them not to have to be on the shop floor all day, every day. Yeah. So I think, for me that has stood the test of time and will do. I really mad plug for my friend Nikki Gibson, who runs Chief Metachicks. She has a podcast from Chief Metachicks where she interviews women entrepreneurs, and certainly whilst the leadership numbers globally around the industry are low for women, we certainly know that women in small business in Australia is very much thriving. So that's a great podcast to listen to hear stories from women in all sorts of different businesses at all sorts of different stages, and their wisdom about what it took to go from good to great, but from small to sustainable and scale. I'm a mad reader, although I've got to say my reading tends to go down to the social justice side of things these days. I cannot go past my great friend and mentor, Susan Colantuno. She has a book called No Ceiling, No Walls. It's where I cut my teeth on some of the principles that I deal with in my book. And for any woman who wants to move through the career ladder, through all of the layers of management to your position, to the C-suite and beyond, it's a must read because it has the fundamentals of business. And those fundamentals around business intelligence, the missing link or the missing 33%, as Susan calls it, is really learning about the importance of business, strategic and financial acumen.
Yeah.
Because your people stuff, your EQ will get you to middle management, but unless you can run a business with all of that stuff, you're going to be found wanting.
Yeah, you've got to know the levers.
100%. So they're my recommendations.
Awesome, thank you. And what's coming up for you?
Well, my wife and I are about to head to our other home in Bali in a couple of weeks' time. So I split my time between Bali and Australia, which is very pleasant. I'm really pleased. I'm doing a very big leadership program for one of the local government associations here in Australia, in Melbourne, I should say. So taking a couple of hundred leaders through the Leadership Compass leadership program. And look, I'm really excited to do it because it's all genders. So I often work only with women, but this is all genders and all levels of leadership.
Wow.
So I'm really, really excited by that. I'm actually super excited by it, nerdishly excited. And look, I'm just at the moment I'm writing a lot.
Have you always had a passion for writing, or is it just a new thing that's come up? Or
always been a reader and always been a scribbler. And when I first started, and look, when I did my MBA, which I did, quite late, I did that in my late 40s. I discovered that A, I really liked writing, B, I could write. I knew I could anyway, but I've been used to writing in a business, I've been writing business cases and, all that kind of stuff. But I discovered that I could write, but I really enjoy it. And for me, writing is a form of therapy. So I will have a brain fart, put it down, usually rage about something, put it into my notes in my phone, then read it back, taking my mum's advice. Thank you, Mum. Michelle, count to 10, then speak. Yes, Mum. write it in my notes, then rewrite it. But, so I'm doing a lot of writing and writing on Substack. I enjoy being of service to people. So I really want to capture my thoughts, my feelings, my experiences, but my tools and my tips. So that's really emerging as a very, very enjoyable part of my work at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So if any of our listeners wanted to contact you to find out more about what you do, how would we go about it?
MichelleRedfern.com is pretty easy. That's my website. If you Google me, I'll pop up somewhere in your soup. I'm very active on LinkedIn and Instagram. Less on Facebook these days. On Substack, I'm on Substack writing.
TikTok.
And on TikTok, yes.
Are you really?
Yeah, bloody oath. Yeah. I'm a little bit more sweary and I'm very unfiltered on TikTok, actually. So
I better start following you then.
yeah. So, yes, I must. And I do, look, I'm a politics wonk too, and I have very strong opinions, full stop. But I use that as kind of my unfiltered outlet for, every random thought that I have.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Today.
This is awesome.
I know, it's been amazing, and I've learned so much about you and also diversity, equity and inclusion. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And I know that our listeners will have taken so much away from it as well.
Well, Xanny, I'd also like to reflect that back at you, that there will be your listeners, your followers, and particularly women in the industry, and I hope a lot of good men as well will be looking at you as an example of someone a woman who's a CEO, who's a young woman who's a CEO, and that, don't be unaware of the shadow that you cast. It is longer than you think, and there are more people watching you, admiring you. And I know that the mantle of leadership can be heavy sometimes, but do know that just by sheer weight of the stuff that you're doing, including this podcast, that you are really giving back to the women in business community. So well done you.
Thank you. I've also renamed it to the Leadership Glow.
Oh, cool. There you go. Yeah. There you go. All right. Awesome.
Thanks, Michelle.
Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to today's bite-sized episode. We hope you got some industry insights and tips for your business. Subscribe to our podcast and tune into our next episode. Feel free to reach out to me for any comments and questions via LinkedIn.